guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow, and I am back with a new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read on Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee. So if that sounds good to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. Now, to be fair, this is not actually the topic that I was planning on doing today, but after recording and re-recording, starting on Tuesday, today being Thursday, the topic I was planning on looking into, as well as editing this video, I was still not satisfied with any of it. And I took that to mean this is just not the right time, that I am not meant to share this particular topic. I'm not meant to talk about it now. This is why I also completely shifted gears, and I want to share something light and fluffy, because the last two videos being true crime and planning on sharing another true crime video today, I said, you know what? It's a sign. I'm not meant to do this today. Let it go. So perhaps you can take that and you can apply it to something in your life as well. Where do you have resistance, or where are things not flowing? Because if they're not flowing, it's because it's probably not meant to be. So that is why we are completely shifting gears, and we're going to be talking about Pamela and Tommy. It's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit fluffier. However, if you've been watching me for a while, you know that no video is going to be devoid without either the energetic or vibrational or the soul component behind it. So yes, there's going to be some of that goodness mixed in here as well. And for anybody that is new, welcome. I'm Faye. I am an intuitive, an energy reader, a channeler. I'm also just an empath, and I'm hella sensitive to energy. So when I tap into somebody's energy, when I'm meditating, sometimes it comes fast and furious and hard. Sometimes I'll just kind of surrender and I'll be like, show me whatever is in my highest good to know right now. And therefore, a lot typically comes in. And this is also why I always have notes, and I always have to read from my notes. So please forgive me if you're new, if I'm maybe not like other channelers who are like channeling on the spot. That's just not me. It's a very personal and private practice for me when I do connect to and channel people's energy. It's never done kind of like this, like in an exposed kind of a way. And also, what's really notable and interesting about this particular video is when I had connected to Tommy's energy, it was like a stream of consciousness. And his lexicon and his terminology and the way he speaks is completely not like mine. And I would be missing the nuances of it if I was not sharing verbatim what came in. Because sometimes I'm literally just the hand that holds the pen, and the channeled information comes in and I'm just at it and I'm taking whatever is coming in. And I would not be doing justice to the way in which Tommy communicates if not for me sharing what he is saying. If I paraphrase it, you're not going to get the fullness and the sense of who he is. He has a very particular way of talking, which you will come to understand when we get to him. So I'm going to be referring to my notes. Please forgive me, but to get the fullness of the experience when I am channeling, it's the default. All right. Now, why, after having the longest intro in the history of mankind, okay, so the other videos were not working out. We're talking about Tommy and Pamela. It's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit fluffier. There's these undertones of the energetic and the spiritual components as well. So for anybody who is not familiar with these two people, let's talk a little bit about them. Pamela Anderson is a TV actress. She's also appeared numerous times in Playboy, but she rose to fame on a TV show called Baywatch. And on Baywatch, she played a lifeguard, and almost the entirety of her role was saying a few lines, running around on the beach in a skimpy red bathing suit, showing off her body. So that was kind of her claim to fame. Now, Tommy Lee was a drummer in a band by the name of Motley Crue. So even prior to them getting together, they had had some level of success and fame in their own right. However, when they got married and they got together, there was a compilation tape of them having sex that was first released on VHS, and then it was released on the internet. And then their level of notoriety was like in the stratosphere. It was like on a completely different level. So maybe you have heard about them, maybe you know their story very, very well. Let's explore what was going on for each of them individually and independently. What was their energy and their energetic blueprint, and what was the karma that was playing out between the two of them? Let's dive in. So Pamela, this is her all sharing with me. So when I connected to her energy, she was a little bit more chatty. She really wanted to talk. She really wanted to have a dialogue with me. I kind of get the sense that because she felt so exposed by the sex tape being released, she doesn't like the idea of having an energy reader look into her energy. It was more like, you're here, okay, cool, let's talk. It kind of almost felt like if I would have showed up at her door to do an interview, she would have like opened up the door, invited me in, we would have talked for a few minutes, she would have offered me coffee, tea, whatever. Like, she would want to get to know me first and have a dialogue with me before she was going to actually start opening up her life to me. So a lot of the energy, the energetic exchange between the two of us is actually where it was more of a dialogue. It was like she would share things with me, and then I would ask her questions and she would answer them. But she kind of wanted it to be more on her terms because she didn't really want her life to be an open book. It's like, if you want to know, that's okay, but come ask me. Don't go looking around without my consent about it. And I respect that. So right from the get-go, she had shared that she still feels very exposed by the ordeal with the sex tape and is still shocked by it. It actually shook her to her core, and she felt that it turned her into a punchline, and that thereafter she had lost all credibility. That being the sex tape, as well as Tommy. And this is where she wanted to start talking to me about Tommy. She shared that there genuinely was a lot of love there between them, but that it was, in her words, misguided. Pamela shared that she had self-worth issues that had plagued her whole life, and most of her drive to be naked and to be in Playboy and to accept the role on Baywatch, knowing that she was going to be in a bathing suit, was that she had felt or thought at that time that if men lusted after her or wanted her, it meant that she had value. She has self-worth issues. Now she understands that's not true, and becoming a mother helped cure a lot of that, but that growing up, she never felt good enough, smart enough, or yes, even pretty enough. And she definitely never felt loved enough. And therefore, she always went looking for these things in all the wrong places. Now, she also shared with me that because of her self-worth issues, she was very good at sabotaging actual good things in her life, and specifically relationships. And that she would sabotage it as a way to justify her self-worth issues. So how might we see that playing out? She might be in a healthy, loving, and good relationship with a man, and then she'll behave in a certain kind of a way that will cause the man to reevaluate her or reevaluate the relationship, and which will lead him to then in turn end the relationship with her. And then what will that do? That will stand as a bolster to the self-worth issues that she has. See, I'm really not that good, because if I was, he wouldn't have broken up with me. So this was a cycle that she herself was stuck in. Yeah, she was stuck energetically in this cycle, and somehow, therefore, when Tommy came along, she convinced herself that Tommy was the right, these are her words, fit for her. But she also wanted to feel that, share that she acknowledged the red flags, but again, did not heed their call because of her self-worth issues. And she felt subconsciously that Tommy was just as dysfunctional as her, and that, because of that, they'd be a good fit together because of it, but that she was mostly in denial. So here's an example I've given before in other videos, which serves this really, really well. So why, we're going to use my crystals and we're going to pretend that they're magnets. So why was she, even though she's taking the responsibility and she's saying she was sabotaging the healthy relationships that she was in before, and that when she met Tommy, despite the presence of the red flags, she felt, in her words, they were just, what was it? He was just as dysfunctional as her. Okay. And that's why she thought that it was going to work better with him. So here's why. It's all about energy and vibration. Like attracts like. Now, we're going to use my crystals as an example, and we're going to pretend that they're magnets. I don't understand the way that it works, but if they're tuned into the same kind of like polarity, then what will happen is you can have two magnets, and if you move them close to each other, they're going to be attracted and they're going to connect and they're going to click into place. But if you take one of those magnets and you turn it around, it's now no longer facing the same polarity. So what will you then see playing out? As this one comes closer, this one will be repelled. So this comes in, this goes away. This comes in, this goes away. And on it goes, where they're kind of chasing each other. It's an energetic or vibrational repel, so to speak. Now, I'm not saying that she was so diametrically opposed from the other relationships that she was in that they were like repelled by her. No. It's just to say that vibrationally, they were not tuned into the same direction. So that's why there was not this ultimate, long-lasting connection. There was maybe a little bit of this playing out. They come together, and then they were turned to the opposite polarity. Like attracts like. So you can perhaps, if you're in a good space in your life and you're more energetically aligned, you can bring positive things into your life. But then when you're in a downswing of that, then you're not an energetic match for those things any longer. And maybe you've seen this playing out in your own life, which is where, as you have begun your ascension process, you're noticing that people and things are falling away from you. Why is that? It's because you're no longer turned into the same frequency. You're no longer on the same polarity. You're no longer a vibrational match for one another. So this is kind of what she is pointing out. Now, she actually said it very, very eloquently up ahead, and we're getting to it, but I love the way that she said it. So yes, she shared that while she was mostly in denial, she also very much did not see herself clearly, again, because of her self-worth issues, and she saw herself more in line with a Tommy than anyone else she could have or had been with. So this is somebody that was not identifying herself at a certain vibrational level, maybe perhaps a more elevated vibrational level. So because of her identification of herself, she lowered her energetic vibration so she could be a better fit with Tommy. She related more to him, and she even shared why coming up ahead. Now, she shared with me that being with Tommy felt like being on drugs. This, too, she now recognizes as a red flag, but it felt right. It felt easy, and it felt like love. But she now says she sees he was pumping her up with false love that she so desperately needed. And the other men that she had been with, or these other men that didn't have this kind of codependency dynamic playing out between them, the other men did not hook her in. Again, her words. She is recognizing there were red flags, that on some level she had to lower herself to be with him. She felt more in line with him because of her self-worth issues, not seeing herself clearly. Being with Tommy felt like being on drugs, and she felt hooked in by him. Okay. So she shared that the other men that did not have this codependency dynamic, the other men that didn't have this codependency dynamic playing out interpersonally between the two of them would not hook her in. And this is because they were more secure within themselves. So, because they were more secure within themselves and they didn't have any codependency dynamic, she never really felt needed by them. But Tommy really needed her. Like, really, really, really needed her. And it was sometimes very intense, but she finally felt valuable because of it. She realizes now it wasn't love, but it was two wounded souls finding each other in a wounded world, and they called it love. It wasn't love, but two codependent and needy people filling each other up on the fake fantasy that it was real. And she acknowledges that, of course, they were doomed to fail. Now, here she kind of went into a monologue of thought. It was kind of like a stream of consciousness, but I actually really like this stream of consciousness. Not that I think she cared if I liked it or disliked it. It's just more me sharing with you that as an energy reader, to get a behind the veil view of somebody's thought process as it pertains to an unhealthy relationship, and to see how she acknowledged all of these things as unhealthy, was very, very remarkable. And you're going to see what I mean. So she was, of course, flattered that he came to Mexico when she was there. Now, for anybody who's not familiar with this, my understanding of them is that they had met, and what's so funny is, like, I'm like far from the authority on these things. Like, I watched the series, the fictional retelling of the Pam and Tommy relationship on, I think it was Hulu, I don't know how many months ago. And so I'm just kind of going off of, like, this is like anecdotally, I'm going off of what I remember. Like, I'm not in any way, shape, or form, like, you know, I really don't research my videos. I'm going off of what I recall. I didn't like look into like the genealogy and the timeline of things. I'm just kind of winging it here. But her energy came into me, so obviously it's okay for me to reshare all of this. And if you really want to have like a detailed understanding of what happened with these two, there's always Google. When you don't want Google, you come to me, because my guides are my Google. Okay. So they had met in a club, and I think like he had come over to her and he like had licked her face, and then like she had licked his face, or she had licked like her friend's face. And then they had like sat around and they were drinking and they were talking the whole night, and that was that. They didn't like hook up or anything. And then I think a few days later he had called her up, and she was like, I can't really talk right now. I gotta go, I'm going to Mexico. And what did he do? He flew down to where she was in Mexico, and he went like hotel to hotel to hotel until he found her. Now, for someone that was not energetically wounded this way, if you, first and foremost, is if a guy came up to you in a club, or if it was a guy that you were even like sitting at a table with and he licked your face, like, I'm going to kind of go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say you'd be like, you're fucking weird, fuck you and goodbye. She was down with it. Now, this is not a judgment. Like, this is who she was vibrationally attuned with. I don't have any beef with that. And as somebody who was looking into her story, it's not for me to have a beef with it or not. But this is what she was aligned with. Now, I'm going to take this a step further, and I'm going to say, let's say you had spoken the same guy, or any guy that you had spent one night with, again, not hooking up, but in a club, and he calls you and you're like, I really can't talk, I gotta go, I'm going on a business trip to Mexico. And then he shows up there. That would be freaky. that would be a huge red flag, right? That would be like, holy shit, complete lack of boundaries. That would be a turnoff. But for somebody that is wounded and has a lack inside of themselves, this was not a turnoff. So, she was, of course, flattered that he came to Mexico when she was there. Parentheses, her acknowledgement, red flag. That he proposed so soon. I think he proposed to her 2 days later. Parentheses, her acknowledgement, red flag. That he was happy that she accepted. Parentheses, her acknowledgement, red flag. That she moved into his house, right? They didn't get their own house, she moved into his house. Parentheses, acknowledgement, red flag, and how obsessed he was with his penis. Parentheses, acknowledgement, red flag. But that also, despite all of these red flags, he was equally, parentheses, her acknowledgement, artificially, obsessed with her. Though she did not realize at the time, he was mostly obsessed with how she made him feel. He was married to the hottest woman on TV, and that made him feel powerful. That which in turn filled him up and his own self-worth issues. Now this is where Tommy's energy came in. He wanted to have a talk with me too. Pammy can't have all the fun. And he shared with me that all of his tattoos, because he's quite heavily tatted up, all of his tattoos was just a way of hiding himself, as he was hiding behind them and hoping no one would come poking around behind them to see how damaged and how scared he was. Music, too, was something he hid behind because the noise drowned out his completely overactive mind and distracted him from the constant emotional pain he was in. Why was he in constant emotional pain? There was abuse at home, and his father had a drinking problem. He also shared with me that he never had a moment's peace and never knew how it felt to not be completely dysregulated in his adrenals. So he was, if you will, in a constant state of fight or flight. Completely dysregulated. Now, he also admitted that tattoos for him was absolutely a version of cutting, and it's a more socially acceptable version and one that he could hide behind. So what is cutting? This is kind of going to be like a rough explanation of it, but it is where somebody is in so much emotional pain, perhaps with the absence of a safe environment in which they can express that emotional pain, but nonetheless, it cannot reside in their body. So what they will resort to is cutting themselves. And they'll usually cut themselves in a discrete place where it's not necessarily noticeable on their physical body. So maybe like on their thigh or their abdomen or someplace like that. And it's because the buildup of the pain inside of them is so great that the only way that they can deal with it is to cut themselves, because the cutting is, if you will, a releasing of the emotional pain. Now, it's also scarring them. So it kind of plays into this idea that they're like a damaged soul, if you will. They're now going to mark themselves permanently, in most cases, with the one thing that is an outlet for them. So cutting is actually a fascinating dynamic. So for him, this is him again sharing this with me. Okay, so yeah, sorry, I just skipped ahead. So yes, absolutely, the cutting for the tattoos was a form of cutting, which was his only outlet, and it was a socially acceptable without the understanding that what is getting tattoos, and especially maybe not like all tattoos. Like there's people who get very, very like dainty one tattoo, right? But for someone who is going to tattoo the entirety of their body, he has incredible tattoos like all over his torso, his arms, probably like, I don't know, his thighs. But somebody that's like really, really committed to it, this is a form of cutting. It's a release from the uncomfortable emotions that are inside of them without either a healthy outlet in which they can release it into, or with having the understanding or tools for how to better cope with all of those emotions. So they will resort to something such as tattooing, because it's a replacement of the cutting. There's still the evidence of that experience left behind as a tattoo. So he very much was using that tattoo as a socially acceptable version of cutting, and also one in which he could hide behind. Now, he continued to share that for him, meeting Pamela felt like a dream. His words. I happen to agree with him though. She was so fucking hot. She is. And he liked knowing he'd be the envy of all of his friends. So we're getting a little bit of insight into him, right? His words, damaged and scared. His adrenals were completely out of whack. He was engaged in a socially acceptable form of cutting. And meeting Pamela felt like a dream to him because she was so fucking hot and he liked being the envy of all of his friends. Okay? We're getting an idea of who this person is. Now, he's acknowledging she was also exceptionally wounded, and thus they were a perfect vibrational match. I kind of took liberty with what he was saying because these are not words that he would use. But he was like, they were vibing. Again, see parts passing about the magnets. Energetic match, tuned into the same polarity and the same frequency, they come together and they click. Okay. Best of all, she was porous and open, and he could project all his hopes and dreams of what they were onto her. Stream of consciousness coming in, that's a head up. So, best of all, she was porous and open, and he could project all his hopes and dreams of what they were onto her. And for a while, that made him feel good. Or a little better. Or not that much better. Or not that much at all. But by then, she was pregnant, and fuck man, he didn't remember signing up for this shit. So remember what I had said at the beginning? I need my notes because it brings in the fullness of the way that a person communicates. This is his way of communicating. I'm a cursor too, but I don't curse like this. So, fuck man, he didn't remember signing up for this shit. Growing up, being a parent, nah man, it wasn't what he had wanted. This was Pammy's idea. He was too busy burying himself in the light that was her to notice what was going on. It's like a moth being drawn to a flame. But there they were. And then they were parents, and then she was pregnant, and then she was pregnant again. And what the fuck? They were always so tired, and Pammy was never in the mood of having sex anymore. And all she'd do, again, these are his words, all she'd do is coo and ooh and ah over her fucking baby. Not my words. Again, I have to say it. This is his energy. And one day he snapped. Like legit, man. He just snapped. But it wasn't really him. Really, I believe him, right? Internal dialogue. Him having. Okay, fine. He snapped. It's true. But he didn't really hurt her. So it's okay. Plus they were sleep deprived and all new parents fight. So of course it's okay. So for anyone who is not familiar, what was the eventual demise of these two was that he had snapped, his words also. It probably wasn't, that's like an oversimplification. But after they had their second child, I don't remember exactly what happened. He had like grabbed onto her, or he had hurt her in some way, and she had called the police. And then it's my understanding that he was arrested and he had done like 6 months in prison for what had happened. Okay, so this is him sharing that, okay, fine, he snapped, it's true, but he didn't really hurt her, so it's okay. Plus they were sleep deprived and all new parents fight, so of course it's okay. Justification, stream of consciousness on his part. True, he's acknowledging they needed to be apart, but his whole fucking world imploded after that, and that was not okay. He wanted me to know that was not okay. So it's at this point that I actually stopped him and I asked him about the sex tape, and he said rather dismissively, oh, that. He shared with me that he still wasn't sure why it was such a big deal to Pammy. Lack of emotional empathy. He felt it gave them street cred. And he liked knowing that other people knew he was packing heat in the sheets. And Pammy was so fucking hot. So what's not to like about people seeing him fuck her? It didn't really seem like that big of a deal to him. He never really got the fuss about it, but he had to go along with it for her. His words. So it's here that I again interjected and I asked him about fighting with his son Brandon, because there was an episode a few years ago. Both of their kids are adults now. I think they're in their 20s. So they have 2 kids together, Brandon and Dylan. And there was some sort of an altercation that happened a few years ago between him and his oldest son by the name of Brandon. Again, I don't research my videos. I don't know exactly what happened. There was some sort of an altercation between the 2 of them. So I asked him about him fighting with his adult son Brandon, and he was equally dismissive in saying that, quote, families fight. And he admonished me and encouraged me to stop looking to make it a big deal. Like I was just asking questions. But he admonished me and told me to stop looking and stop making it a big deal. And then he shifted and said he never really got on with his sons, and he always felt disadvantaged because of what had happened, and that Pammy always had the upper hand and turned the boys against him. What is this? Is the terminology for this? Blame shifting. Oh yes, blame shifting. So he was shifting all of the blame onto Pammy. I asked how he felt about her now that she had her mini comeback, and he said he was, quote, happy for her, but again, he didn't like that we were talking about Pammy again, so he also said he was too busy with his own life to really pay much attention to it. So it's kind of the equivalent of like sniffing and turning your head against something. It's kind of what he did. Now, it's at this point that I returned back to Pamela, and I was happy to, because I find her energy to be a lot more introspective and interesting than Tommy's. He's a little one note for me. She's a little bit more complex. She has more dimension to her. A lot more introspection. Now, I asked her, I wanted to get her take on it. So I asked her what she thought happened the night that Tommy hurt her. But she first wanted to share something with me before she was going to talk about that. This is what she shared with me. She said she was so desperate to become a mother because that would somehow free her from what she had become. She was a one-note character, a sex symbol, and she wanted to be so much more. She had done a movie, I believe by the name of Barbarella, never saw it, but I think she was like a sexy, badass crime fighter. And she wanted to be more. She wanted to embody more. She wanted to be more. She wanted to have more dimension in the roles that she was getting, but she was so typecast at that point into just being, the sex symbol, and she acknowledged it. So she felt like the ultimate form of rejection was to go from being a sex symbol to being a mother, which in my words, she was seeking to elevate herself from the lowest expression of being a woman to the highest expression, fully embodying the divine feminine. Now, before anybody wants to give me grief, this is where I'm going to interject and I'm going to explain this. It's not to say that if a woman doesn't become a mother, she's not fully embracing the highest version of what it means to be a divine feminine. No. It's to say that if all we rely on, which is her acknowledgement, she was a one-note character and a sex symbol, if all we rely on is our body and our sex appeal, that is the lowest three-dimensional expression of what it means to be a woman, right? It's like women can use their boobs to sell anything in the world, but when a woman wants to breastfeed in public, people are like, that's gross, and they turn away. It's the same thing. So it's where she was basically saying, I don't want to be a one-note, three-dimensional character any longer. I want to embrace the fullness of what it means to be a woman. And for her, that meant becoming a mother. It doesn't mean that for every single person, but it means to elevate from the lowest base, what the interpretation of a woman is, which is what? All of this. So it's just that she wanted to have an energetic glow up to become a more fully developed person. And in her mind, the way that she could do that was the complete rejection of the three-dimensional expression of what it meant to be a woman, right? I'm using my boobs to sell X, Y, and Z. She wanted to reclaim her divine femininity and where she was going to become a mother, and she was going to use her boobs for the nourishment of her children. That is what this meant. Now that she shared that, she was ready to share what she think happened on the night that he had hurt her. She shared that a lot of her dysfunction and codependency with Tommy was cured by becoming a mother. That's why she shared parts passing, what she had just shared before. She really, really wanted me to understand how she was fundamentally changed by becoming a mother, and how her dysfunction, her words, her dysfunction and her codependency was cured by becoming a mother. Because now she had actual little human souls that were completely dependent on her. And her growing up and not wanting to entertain Tommy really got to him. So this is her understanding. She grew up by the experience of becoming a mother. Tommy did not. He still wanted Pammy version 1.0. The sex pot version of Pammy, who was sexy and vivacious and young and wanted to have sex. Now she was Pammy 2.0 with little humans that were depending on her for their survival. Her kids they're pretty close in age. She really had two little souls that were completely dependent on her. Tommy didn't understand that. He still wanted Pammy 1.0. She had already elevated and she was Pammy 2.0. He couldn't deal with it. And she was thinking that they probably really were over, but actually she was just thinking that she needed to get herself and her kids away from Tommy. Again, Tommy 1.0. She didn't feel that she was safe or her kids were safe with Tommy 1.0 when she was Pammy 2.0. Now, apparently they had gotten back together a few years later, and this is where she actually wanted to acknowledge something about that with me. So she acknowledged it was probably a mistake to ever get back together with him, but it seemed like he had changed too, and he was reformed, but that it didn't last long. I'm gonna guess this was a Hoover attempt on his part, a successful Hoover attempt. And she's acknowledging that on her part, this was a fantasy. She longed for the idea of a family, and who better to play house with than the actual father of your kids. Now, I also understand that she's been married a bunch of times. I don't know how many, maybe like 5. I don't know. 5 or, I don't know, 5 or 6 maybe. And she wanted to kind of address that. And she had shared with me that all of the relationships she had had thereafter and all of the weddings that she had had was an expression of her longing for a home and trying to create it. Now, here is my 2% opinion. I actually interjected with the flow of consciousness because I wanted to bring this to you guys, which she was longing for a home and seeking to create it, but she was seeking to create it through external means. And here is where she lacks insight in realizing that she needed not any of these men, and everything she seeks, she already has. She didn't need to go looking for it externally. She already had everything inside of herself. She just doesn't, she's not quite there yet. She's so introspective and so insightful, but still feels like there's something fundamental missing that she needs to acquire through a relationship with another person. She does, however, understand that what happened to her with the sex tape was some kind of karma, because she always wanted to feel wanted, and she got that good. And that she also got more than she bargained for. Because she wanted, she got more than she bargained for. From that, men weren't just fantasizing about having sex with her, they were seeing her actually have sex. So I'm going to interject here, and I'm going to go back to this example. I hope you're not tired of it yet. So, like attracts like, and we will attract into us experiences that we are most vibrationally aligned with. So it was through her so desperately needing to feel wanted and understanding that if men saw her in Playboy being semi or mostly nude, and that she was on Baywatch running with everything being so exposed and shaking around, that it was going to lead to men fantasizing about her. So it was through her, if you will, acknowledgement of this and through her choice of this, that what could we say was actually attracted into her? It was the experience of everything that had played out with the sex tape, and that men were not just wanting her or fantasizing about her, they were seeing her actually having sex. Because it's not just magnets when it comes to relationships. It's magnets when it comes to the kind of experiences that we, if you will, call into ourselves. What are we a vibrational match for? You want to know what you're a vibrational match for? Look around by your external circumstances. That will tell you what you're a vibrational match for, because you are creating your reality with your vibrational output. Now, I'm going to put a pin in this because here's where it gets a little bit dicey. And it's not to blame anybody if they have ever been in a toxic relationship, or have been in an abusive relationship, or have been fundamentally hurt by somebody on a very, very deep level. Because understand, as I have shared in a great number of my other videos, anything of that nature is typically a soul contract. So it's not like you come into this life and you're just vibrating in this horrible vibration and you're attracting all of these horrible things into your life. It's to say that when something so fundamental like that happens, it's because you have agreed to that prior to your incarnation. That's going to be one of your soul lessons. It's going to be one of the major arcs in this particular incarnation's soul's experience. So I just want you to understand that there is a distinction here. She is acknowledging that because of her vibrational output and in her desire, in longing, in wanting to feel wanted by all of these men, that created the reality where not only were they wanting her, they were seeing the completion of their own fantasies playing out vis-a-vis her husband. Now, maybe the relationship she had with Tommy was a soul contract. That was not shared with me. But what happened with the sex tape is her acknowledgement that it was a energetic match for her frequency and how she had attracted that into her. But her relationship with Tommy and him showing up the way that he did and him hurting her, that was two wounded souls coming together, and very likely a karmic, something that was on a soul level agreed to prior to their incarnating into this life. So I just want you to understand that something very, very big and notable is a contract you have agreed to prior to incarnating in. Once you wake up to it, once you're like, oh, that's the kind of man I was with, I get it now. If we subsequently will get into additional relationships like that, that is probably the residue or aftershock, if you will, of those experiences. But if we now understand what it was and we continue to go into those relationships, then that is the vibrational match that's drawing us together. So we are always presented in every incarnation with the opportunity through various things to come to us to play out different realities that we want to have. Am I going to make a choice in this particular incarnation, for example? I'm no longer going to have a relationship with this kind of man. I'm no longer going to go into an employment with this kind of an employer, right? So these experiences come to us. It's for us to sift and sort through because free will reigns supreme. So we get to decide in any incarnation, am I ready to ascend and graduate, if you will, from this particular lesson? Or do I want to maybe explore it a few more times before I really am ready to move on? And sometimes it happens in one incarnation and sometimes it happens in multiple. And that's okay too. We're all kind of here working through our own kind of shit and exploring all of our karmic shit. And we're all kind of like exploring the different facets and the different aspects of ourselves. There's never anything wrong. It's all right. Everything that's happened to us is right. How is it right? It's right because it's our agreement to experience them. So just give yourself some credit. Okay, now, she also shared that on some level, this was the beginning of the end for her and Tommy. And I thought that this was so interesting, the way that she had presented it, which got me also thinking something else, which I'm going to share with you. So this was the beginning of the end for her and Tommy, because there was really nothing left between them when the world had seen the most intimate and private moments between them. So this is, again, if you will, the outsourcing of her own personal relationship status to the entirety of the world. Because she is basically saying that because so many people in the world had seen their most intimate and private moments, that was the beginning of the end for her relationship with Tommy. We, however, need not have people seeing sex tapes of us having sex for a relationship to come to an end. So she's incredibly introspective. However, I also felt like on some levels, she was also very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like almost idealistic, I would say, but also the continuation of the outsourcing of fundamental parts of herself onto the external, instead of like the ownership and the acknowledgement that it was the beginning of the end of the relationship, because they were two wounded people that had come together, and she was in the process of healing her hurts, which was then allowing her to evolve and ascend. And that's why they were no longer a vibrational match for one another. Now, she also shared with me that she is eternally grateful for the experience of being a mother, and she feels that becoming one had really saved her. And she also wanted to end on this note, which is that she wanted to share that being pretty doesn't solve all of somebody's problems, and that so much of what we see playing out in the world is a fabrication, but not to believe that just because she was on TV in a bathing suit, that her life was devoid of problems. Because in fact, in some ways she feels she had a unique set of problems because of it. So no, the grass is not always in fact greener. So I hope that you guys have found this video to be interesting and informative, maybe thought-provoking. And as always, until next time, stay in the high vibration.